kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you. I started, well, the pastors couldn't make it, so for some reason, the duty fell on me. But we all have to have a story about Denny, and all of you could raise your hand and say a story. And you've all heard the stories before, but if you get one that really like, and I'll start it off here. But a couple of years ago, some friends of ours, they're sitting back here, I won't mention names, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but invited us to go to the cowboy church. So Olette and I went, and something happened to me. We were so happy with it, and we had so much fun that we started telling people about it, and Denny and Susie were a couple of the first ones to follow us and come out. And they've come out ever since, haven't you?
Yes.
And
Warm and
so
welcoming.
one of his favorite jokes now I know if you do tell one of his jokes or say something about him, just don't use sailor language. One of his jokes, his favorite ones was, a little boy about 5 years old picked up the Bible one day, and it opened up, and a leaf fell out of it. And he ran and got his mom, and he said, Mom, look what that. She says, oh, a leaf. And he said, no, that's Adam's underwear. So that's my joke, and I don't. We've just had a good time. We go out to lunch quite often, and everywhere we go, I was gonna. Maybe I'll read it now. Not read it. I'll have to. I can't see it because of the light and everything. And my eyes, they aren't aging. They're too experienced. But one thing the scripture I had here, Olette said I had to have a scripture, so I've got a scripture. And I know what it is. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. And then there's another part of it. Another scripture goes right along with it. That's one commandment. There's two important commandments. The other one is love thy neighbor as thyself. And if you knew Denny Orr, he loved his neighbor. If you ever went out to eat with him, if you ever just went in a store with him and he saw somebody that was uncomfortable, he just saw somebody and something struck him, within just a couple of minutes, then he had another friend. And that's how we look at it. And I know all of you have stories about him, and so I'm not going to give you a big sermon or anything because I don't have one. But I'm just going to call upon anybody that has a story to come up and tell it, or just tell it where you are. If you can.
I'm going to come up.
Okay. The rest of you be thinking about it, because I know you have a lot of you have good stories.
Thanks, Tom. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Marilyn Kimmons, and my hubby's Jim Kimmons, and we live at North Ranch. We have known Denny and Susie for a lot of years. First time we met them was at an escapade, and as I expressed online recently, one of our greatest joys was watching them dance. You just could sit for hours and watch them glide across the floor. And whatever the rhythm was that was being played, they knew how to dance to it. And we just marveled at that. Well, later on, they became our chapter directors and then our VCR directors. But before that, the first winter that they came to North Ranch, my sister arrived from Nebraska. And she was telling Denny, you know, in all the various places I've lived, I've never lived in the desert. He said, well then, we need to teach you a few things about the desert. And she said, well, how are you gonna do that? Denny looked at Susie and me and said, girls, pack us some food for tomorrow. We're hitting the desert. And so out we went with our Jeeps. And Lynn, when I called her this week and told her that Denny's gone on to be with our Lord, she said, tell Susie I will always remember that special, special time and him teaching me everything about the vegetation around us and letting me know you can't take the rocks out of the desert. They'll destroy the desert, okay? Then the other fun thing that happened, and Susie, you're gonna laugh at this. Jim and I hosted a Chapter 32 rally in Baghdad years ago. Before the diner was built, there was a big parking lot there where the diner is now. And there was a smaller Bash's where the larger Bash's is now. Well, we were all crammed into that parking lot. And Shelby, the PR lady of Baghdad, decided that we needed to take a trip out the trails to the Wild Horse Ranch where they broke horses. So before she led us out there, she said, now there's an early thaw this spring and you're going on trails. Do not wander off the trail at all or you're gonna get stuck and you're not gonna go anywhere. Well, we got a little ways down the trail and Denny called Jim on the radio and said, help. Jim says, what's wrong? He said, my car slid off the trail and I'm stuck. And Jim looked at me and said, thank God I brought the winch. So back we went, sliding through the mud, and we pulled him out. On we went down the trail. That happened 2 more times. And I think you had a Honda 4-wheel drive at that time, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we finally got to the ranch, and we finally saw the horses, and we watched demonstrations of how they broke horses and so on. And then Shelby came with our box lunches and took us to the National Forest, and as she gave us our box lunches, would you believe in March it began to snow? And there we were. She said, oh, you guys, eat your lunches in a hurry. We're gonna head to the main road. So we did. But when Denny and Susie got to the main road, all their car would do is roar because the wheel wells were full of mud. So they limped back to the parking lot in Baghdad, and Jim has pictures someplace, Susie, he'll dig them out eventually, of Susie and Denny taking all that mud out of the wheel wells of their car so that they could drive their car again. And later that week, you guys that were there, I don't remember what the badge said that
Stuck in the
you
mud.
had made for Denny, but it was something like stick in the mud.
Yeah, stuck in the mud. Thank you.
Keep telling stories like that. We're gonna get a bunch more, I'm sure. Sandy, I know you've got a story.
I got a story. You see this picture up here? I'm gonna tell you about the yellow skirt. Okay, so you can hear me. I'm gonna tell you about that yellow skirt that you see up on that picture. A lot of you are from North Ranch and you probably saw him in that yellow skirt at a La Fiesta. Well, I'm gonna tell you how he got it. That was not Susie's yellow skirt. That was Denny's yellow skirt. I was also a VCR, part of the VCR program. And we were in DeCloyne, Illinois at an escapade when Susie, she was they were chapter directors, but really Susie was in charge of that. Denny liked to tell jokes, and that's about all he did. Anyway, so we went to the meeting, and Susie called the meeting to order, and she's up in front, and one of the VCRs, and I can't remember who it was, got up and called Denny to the front. He said, Denny, we've got something, us VCRs has something for you. And they handed him this package. He opened it up and there was the yellow skirt. He looked at him and said, you know, you shaking this yellow skirt out? I said, well, we know who wears the pants in the family. So then he put that yellow skirt on. Well, the second time he put that yellow skirt on was in March 7th, 2009 at North Ranch's La Fiesta. It was Mardi Gras that year, and we had, you know, there's a Miss Green, Miss Purple, and Miss Yellow. Well, I was Miss Purple. I didn't take that picture because I was up there too. But we had to sashay across the stage in the activity center. And that's Denny sashaying across the stage in his yellow skirt.
I'll do it. I'm Guy DeChellis. I live across the street. And this is also about Susie, because she was one of the people that welcomed us when we lived in North Ranch. But Denny was very kind, and we were only there a short time, and we were at the Moors having a happy hour. And we talked about some friends that were coming, and he offered us to use his ATV to take the friend out into the desert and stuff. But then, you know, as far as the stories that go, there was a time when, and I think it was at Moore's too, that we were talking about something, and I said something about, well, a friend of mine, and whatever the story was, and Denny's like, oh, I know you're lying right off the bat. He says, you don't have any friends. He could really make you feel good, and I miss him.
Thank you.
Yes, he could. See, you guys are doing a tremendous job.
Well, when it comes to Denny, there's no lacking for funny material, that's for sure. And when we have our group campouts, we have a tendency during happy hour to split into groups. So you'd have sometimes women, men, sometimes subgroups and that. And so one of these campouts, we were sitting talking to guys, and this involves Ed Crudy and Denny, which is appropriate because those two guys were great friends. And so we're all talking, and Denny says, hey, Ed, you remember the time? And then he told the story, and they've got the biggest grins on their face. I'll try to remember how the story goes. But if you know Denny, if you're out in your yard, we're neighbors of his, anytime he saw you, he would yell out some wise remark, you know, the great distance, and you carry on a short conversation like that. Well, one time, the way the story was told to me, there's a slight grade between Denny's house and Ed and Sandy's house, which is at the bottom of the hill. And so these two knuckleheads got the idea that, in their infinite wisdom, that Denny was going to try to roll a can of beer down to Ed, and Ed's waiting at the bottom of the hill for it. From what I understand, it didn't make it all the way because it got perforated with holes and beer was flying everywhere.
That was a good one, Art. Thank you.
You notice a vein here? Denny had just a rare knack. I mean, he's one of a kind. He would try not to insult you, but he wanted to bring you a smile to your face. And anybody that knew Denny or talked to him, you wouldn't talk to him long, and he'd have to do something or say something to bring his smile out. And I don't think he ever met a stranger. We would go out to lunch a lot, like I say, and he would just see somebody sitting over there sometime by themselves, and maybe they'd have a sports shirt on, Michigan or wherever, Indiana, but he'd go make a comment about their football team. He loved football. And the other thing about Denny, and I know all of you or a lot of you have experienced this, whenever you needed help, Denny was always the first one there.
Yes.
I remember we had a good friend, Dodie, passed away this last year. We went to lunch one day and he took Colette and I home and he drove back around, and pretty soon here he comes back. He says, Dodie ran into her faucet and water spraying all over, so he and I took a shower that day. But we wouldn't leave her. He wouldn't leave her. Jan?
Yes.
I don't know how many times he said Joe Tenpenny needs something.
Constantly.
And we'd go over there and, hey, Joe wants to put a new TV in his RV. I don't know how. The stories are just, they go on and on and on. We could probably sit here till midnight and tell Denny's stories. Anybody else got anything? Oh, I'm sure you do. Sure, Kim.
I'm Kim Orr. I'm Sean's wife, so Denny's son. And a few years ago, I came out to visit. And so when Tom was saying that Denny always has something to say, that was the perfect segue for this story. So I happened to be visiting at the same time that Denny's cousin's wife and then the second cousin's, her daughter, were here visiting. Not unfortunately on happy, but unfortunate circumstances. Their daughter needed an organ transplant. And so Leanne and Courtney, the donor or the recipient of the lung, were visiting, and they can talk up a storm. And we were sitting on the couch, and it was fantastic because I had not ever really met Leanne nor Courtney, so I was enjoying their stories. And of course, I'd spoken to Denny many times, and I kind of just noticed that all of a sudden he kind of looked like a bottle of pop that had been shaken. And as he got a little more agitated by just not being able to get a word in edgewise, he said, my turn to
I'm sure more of you have more stories. Sure, John.
I'll try to keep it short.
Oh.
My name is John Moore. I have the pleasure and the honor of living across the street from Denny and Susie for several years. Couldn't have asked for better neighbors. We're going to keep you around too.
Yes.
Okay? The story that I'm going to tell is it's a Quartzsite story, and for those of you that have been to Quartzsite, you know we have lots of stories about Quartzsite. Sandy. I'll tell one that's kind of clean, where nobody got inebriated or any of that kind of stuff. We used to do a wide variety of things. We used to have egg in a bag. We used to have margarita parties. But one of the things that we did that was one of our highlights was we used to do stone soup. And Denny and Susie originated the tradition of having some stone soup. If you don't know what stone soup is, it's actually an old English type thing. As the story goes, is that people were really hungry. These peasants were really hungry, and they were cruising through the town trying to get something to eat. Nobody would help them. So what they did is they had a pot, and they went down to the stream and they put a rock in the pot. And when they put the rock in the pot, they came over and they started a fire. And somebody walks along and says, "What do you got in the pot?" And they says, "Well, we're making soup, and right now we've only got the stone, but we could really use an enhancement to that." Well, the people said, "Well, we happen to have some carrots we'll bring in." So they brought the carrots in, and now they've got the carrots in the water and they're boiling it. And somebody else came along and says, "Well, we have some chicken we can put in." So anyway, where stone soup originated from is just they kept filling the pot up, and they ended up having this fantastic soup. We did the same thing in Quartzsite that Denny and Susie had organized, and what we would do is every person would bring one can of something to the stone soup. Well, they would put it in the water, they get it boiling and everything, and the stone soup really went over well. We had people that weren't even part of our group that would come from other places just to contribute to the stone soup to be able to have it in the evening when it was time. Well, one particular year we had more soup than we had stir to get down into the pot so that Denny could stir the pot. So at one point he was halfway up his arm in this pot of hot boiling. I don't know how he did it, but he was stirring the soup. Well, we came up with an idea that we needed to do something different. If you're going to be going to the house afterwards, be sure to look for Orr's Orr. Tom made it. It was long, so that even if we had a big pot, he could still stir the soup without having to put his arm down into the middle of the soup. So yes, at the house, Tom made it, but take particular attention to it. One end looks like an oar to stir the soup, but on the other side is a spoon for sampling.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Very good one. That stone soup made me think of something. I'd heard that famous soup for 2 or 3 years before I was ever able to make it out there and experience it, and it was great. I also learned to know Denny and Susie probably that evening. They shared a lot about their travels at Disneyland and I don't know where else, but it was great. And then Denny really started to like me. He told me joke after joke after joke, and it didn't matter whether I was out there or at the clubhouse or where, he always came to me and told me a special joke, and I knew he liked me. Now I'm not too sure. I think I was the only one who was still listening.
Very good.
That was how you knew Denny liked you. If he told a story about you or tried to get you to laugh, or he'd make himself the butt of the joke, or you. He delighted in that. And you never, with Denny, you didn't know if he had a hold of your ankle, pulling on your leg. But he was such a delight. I remember this isn't, well, it is, it's very complimentary. Denny and Susie had the happy hour at Quartzsite for years. They started, I think you originated it, didn't you?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, something happened anyway that they decided to replace them or whatever. I don't know what happened. But anyway, I thought, boy, if I were Denny and Susie, I wouldn't even go to Quartzsite this year. But I think they had more fun at that particular year. They had so much grace and class. There wasn't any of this headbutting, bickering or anything. They just went on as normal. And it was so impressive. And if you knew them, all you had to do is say, help, and they were right there.
Thank you.
So we really, yeah, Sean. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. Sean, Denny's son. The story I want to tell is about a paddle. So I was a typical teenage boy, not very well mannered, and my sister had some friends over, and I was picking on them. And my dad said, "Well, we're gonna punish you." So he took me to the shop, and we got out a piece of plywood, and we made a paddle. And we planed it down, we put holes in it, and then he was gonna paddle me with it. And I don't know if you've seen the picture of the house. We lived on 2 acres, and the house was in the back of the lot, and there was a highway that ran in front of the house. Well, he got that paddle on, and he was gonna paddle me, and I was like, no way. So I took off out the front of the house. He's chasing me with the paddle. I ran in front of a car slammed on its brakes. 2 old ladies look out, I'm like, stop him, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me. And he's standing there with the paddle looking at the ladies. I just kept running, I was like, I can't go home now. But then that paddle became a thing that, if you all know my dad, he was very energy conscious. And if we left the rear door open, we came in, the lights on, he was gonna paddle you. So he came home from work one day, and he left the door open. And I said, well, Dad, bend over, I'm gonna paddle you. So he did, and I smacked him hard. And he didn't say anything. And I think it was when I was at home from boot camp or something, him and my mom were telling me this story. And I guess he went to bed that night and said, I didn't realize how bad that hurt. We can never use that paddle on that boy again.
It goes on and on like that, doesn't it? A lot of stories you tell we can't tell. Yeah. Kathy's shaking her head, yes.
coming up. Oh, good one.
Hi, I'm Jerry Zolna. I live at North Ranch. And I've known Denny for about 17 years. And he was one of the first people I met whenever my wife and I moved there. He showed us around. He took us out in the desert one time, showed us a few trails. And he also told some of the worst jokes I've ever heard. Both Denny and I like to tell jokes, and we could see who could tell the worst ones. He told some that I thought were groaners. You know what a groaner is? When they tell you the punchline, you go, oh. And the louder you groan, the more Denny liked it. But we were sitting at the Monday morning at the coffee break after the cleanup around North Ranch, and we were talking. He says, Jerry, how far can you go in the woods? I don't know, as far as you want. Come on, Jerry, how far can you go in the woods? I don't know. How far? He looks at me, he says, only halfway, then you're going out. I said, oh. But if there's one word I could use to describe Denny Orr, one word, it would be the word gregarious. And what is gregarious? Well, it comes from the Latin, and it's pronounced just exactly that way, gregarious. And in Latin, it means a herd or a pack of animals. And in our language, it means somebody who's comfortable with a lot of people around him, and who looks for company, who wants people around him and loves people. And that would be Denny Orr. And if he was here today, I would say, Denny, I love you, man.
Thank you. Very good. Good job. Thank you.
You guys are doing great.
Hi, sweetheart.
How are you?
Hi, I'm Pam Brodebeck. We live on the South Running Horse
Yes.
at North Ranch. What Jerry just said kind of leads up to something else. We're on a little more serious note here. Denny loved chapter 32.
Yes.
It came from here. I had the pleasure of being his secretary on the board with chapter 32. And it was a joyous time to serve on that board. I can't count the meetings at our house, and it was always, what can we do to keep this going? And when our time came to leave office, it was the same thing. What can we do to keep this going? This is so important. This is what keeps people together. New officers came in, and it wasn't too long, and I had another visit from Denny. Pam, who can we get to keep this going? And we're in that boat again.
Yes.
Who can we get to keep this going? We need to keep this going in memory of Denny. And from his heart to all of us, let's keep it going for Denny.
Thank you. Good job, Frank.
I know there's more stories.
Oh, I gotta tell this.
No.
It's not bad. But I'm probably gonna embarrass Susie.
Oh,
Well, one of the last camping trips we had was out Pomosa Road near Quartzsite. And nobody's even talked about Denny's Tesla.
oh.
Tesla. Oh, that's almost.
Tesla.
Well, Denny and Susie had this fantastic tent that attached to the Tesla. And we were all there, and pretty soon I see Denny's out there starting to tear things down. And I thought, oh, what's going on? Well, Susie wasn't feeling good, so they were getting ready to go home. So we all jumped over there, or went over and helped them get that all taken down. Well, the last thing was the pot. And I looked at that, it's kind of different. Of course, Denny said, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I said, it's full, I don't know where to empty it. I said, that's all right, I'll take it, put it in my holding tank, you know, so. And I was gonna ask him, I said, do you really go both forms on that thing? But I did. And that was kind of one of our last trips, I guess,
Probably.
pretty much.
Probably.
We had a lot of fun together.
Thank you.
I thought everything that happened at Quartzsite was supposed to stay.
No way.
And Tom said,
There's some worse ones than that.
let's keep them clean. Well, you can't go clean at Quartzsite. Yeah.
Should I come in?
You know, this is one of the quietest happy hours when. They're all trying to soak in these stories, right, Tom?
Well, my name's Tom Thomas. My wife Val and I used to live across the street from Denny and Susie. I don't have a really great story to tell, but Val and I used to eat at McDonald's quite a bit. And it seemed like every time we went in McDonald's, there was Denny and Susie, sometimes with somebody else from North Ranch. They were always there. And I got to figuring out that Denny was a bit of a thrifty guy. And he admitted to me one day that one reason that he liked McDonald's so much was because he didn't have to leave a tip.
Yes. Yes.
And another thing, people have talked about how he liked to help people. It was just last spring sometime, I was working on an off-grid solar system for my place. And I knew he had that set up at his house because he was charging the Tesla with it. So I went up, and he was very proud of what he'd set up and showed me how to do it, and that was a big help for what I did down at my place. So he was always wanting to help people.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in here he didn't help? One time or another.
See if I can make it up there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
My name is George Mayleben, and I'm the owner of the RV driving school.
Oh, boy, you've got some stories.
Well, I don't have very many stories because, again, Denny was one of those people that, well, maybe back up. The school was originally founded to help people be safe in these RVs. And I was just sitting in the back and I went through, I carry a little computer like all of us do in our pocket. And I was looking to see how many lessons that Denny had put on. I don't know, it was many. At first I found about 70 that he had put on during the years that he had worked with the school. One of the things that, and you know, on a very serious note, Denny was an excellent instructor. Incidentally, he did help get my wife to the point where she felt comfortable driving our RV. And Denny was one of those people, though, that did provide challenges. One of the things that, you know, that big hill outside of Congress, you know, going up to Prescott. Pardon?
Yarnell.
Excuse me, Yarnell. Incidentally, if my wife had guts enough to come up here, she would tell you the real stories about Denny. But, you know, one of the things that on a serious note, I was very appreciative of the fact that Denny was and did offer his services, much like you're telling us stories of how he helped so many people, you know, in a very personal way. But he also offered himself available to people who really needed the help, you know, whenever they bought these very expensive rigs and were out on the road. I will share with you that some of the commentary that I have on file about him was all awesome. And of course, often laced with those little tidbits about Denny and some of the comments that made people laugh. What a great guy. One who I'm sure everybody here will say we're gonna miss him. I too will miss him.
Thank you.
Now, your wife isn't the one that he was teaching to drive that got a cramp in her leg and she got up right in the middle of the road, was it?
That wasn't my wife, but I'm sure that it was an interesting.
Anyway, she got a cramp. She just jumped up out of the seat and says, "Oh, I got a cramp." And here they are going down the road. But he said he didn't say a thing to her. He didn't have to. Her husband reprimanded her quite. You could tell a million stories.
Well, everybody knows that Denny and I love to dance. And he had taken dance lessons when he was in the Navy and was quite the star of the studio when I took my first basic learn my left from my right and learn to dance. So it was quite an honor to dance with the big guy at the studio, you know. Lo and behold, we were married about 8 months later. It was a good match. We've had so many good years together.
Yes, you did.
Yes, and we still love to dance. That was just, you know, if there was music, it was time to get up and pitter-patter across the floor. And we were lucky to live at North Ranch because there were so many RV friends that we had met through the years or had common interests. It was just a good place to be that felt like home. So we are very lucky to live there, and at this point I plan to stay for a while longer. I may be getting a little older and a little senile and they don't want me to drive, but I'm sure I can get a ride now and then if people are going to town. But thank you all for being friends and neighbors and caring. We've had a good life RVing, great life at North Ranch. We're just lucky to have all of you with us. Thank you.
You know, all we had to do was have a rainy day or just spur of the moment. And either we'd call Denny or Susie, or they'd call us. It's a rainy day. Oh, it's a good day to go to lunch.
Yes.
And we would get to lunch. Like you say, Denny could be a little frugal at times, but just a little. But we enjoyed it so much. I don't think we ever went to lunch when he didn't make a new friend. He'd see somebody and he'd have to say something for him. Come on down, Denny.
We'll try.
We'll try. Yes.
Now, give
You're
us
just
some music
talking to
here
friends.
and I can talk on this thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like Harvey says, this thing sucks the brains out of you. How many remember the Saturday mornings of breakfast?
Oh, yes.
I remember my first time coming into breakfast and I was greeted by Denny. And throughout the whole time that we were there, he must have tried to give me 20 pancakes. Yeah. And then we found, well, we introduced ourselves. He was Denny and I was Denny. So we were friends from then on. So he always had a joke for me or something else going on there. So in Denny's honor of jokes, and like Harvey says, band jokes, or we say band jokes, a lot of the anyway, I'll tell this joke. Young lady goes to the doctor and she's telling the doctor she has pains anywhere she touches her body.
And that's pretty odd. So he does an examination and they come back and the gal says, am I gonna live, doctor? Am I gonna live? Is it a bad disease? He says, no, I know exactly what is wrong with you, young lady. He says, well, what is it? You got a broken finger. So there.
Thank
you. And we had a good time with Denny, always did. Me and him had a camaraderie because of our names and just back and forth, especially in the breakfast thing. That was very fun.
Thank you.
Yep, and my wife got her first ride in a Tesla.
Oh.
Yeah, breakfasts were always a lot of fun. When Let and I were managers at the park, we were for a year or two. The one year we came back and I think the goat heads and the weeds were knee high all over up in the park where the visitors park. And Denny and Susie were one of the first ones to come up and help. We were pulling them. It was the year of the Yarnell fire and we didn't dare start a fire to burn them or everybody. You know how, for some reason, people have comments, and but they were up there every day helping us pull weeds. I don't know. Denny was so special to me. He would just, you don't know how to explain it, but he could make you laugh when you needed to laugh. If you needed help, he was right there. And if he needed help, he would ask you to. It was a lot of fun. He's taken a tremendous kidding over his Tesla at times, but he was devoted to it. Do any of you know what his Tesla's name is?
Bucket.
Bucket, you know. That was on his bucket list. Anybody else got anything? I'm sure there are more. Gail, you got something? No.
You're welcome to come to the house later.
Pardon me?
You're welcome to come to the house
Yes,
later.
yes, like Susie says, you're welcome to go to the house after you leave here. And I don't know, I guess there's nothing else, so all of you are gonna help me again, aren't you? I know.
Just as a side note, if you go to the house, there's plenty of parking across the street also.
Yeah.
Feel free to park any place that you can find.
Yes, Charles?
I have one more little thing that I'd like to say about Denny.
Okay.
Somebody brought up breakfast.
Oh, yes, breakfast.
Denny and I used to stand side by side on Saturdays doing breakfast, the pancakes or waffles or whatever we were doing at the time. And Denny would make that scene. We were there for probably, let's see, we'd go in about 6 and leave about 10, I think, get home about 10. And he would make that the quickest 4 hours I ever had in my life. He really made it enjoyable. He just was that way. The jokes he told me at the time, I'm not going to repeat.
Those breakfasts were special too. I started to tell it now, I forgot. I think it's I'm not getting older, it's experience.
Oh.
Yeah. But when we managed the park, I would go up in the morning and I was usually, for breakfast, I was usually the first one in there, was I not, Charles? Usually. Well, one year, they kept kidding me about it and kidding me about it. Then this goes to Ed Crudy. One year, he was always after me about being early, always first one there. Well, one year I decided I'm not gonna go early. And they started, I think they opened it, they went up there at 7 o'clock or something like that. Well, I'm sitting at home thinking, well, I'll go up a little later. The phone rang. And it was Ed Crudy. Where are you?
They missed you.
They missed me. But those two could get me in more trouble. No, not trouble. They were tremendous help. I miss them both. Just as we get older, I don't know. it's awful hard. So I'm gonna miss him. He was a kind, funny, do anything for you, and it just, they don't make them like Denny anymore. Anybody? Okay, if you're gonna, will you still help me? Same prayer. All right. What did I pray? Oh, our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Forgive us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive those who have. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, that's all I have. If you want to stand around and talk, but you're invited over.